All right. Our next speaker has actually been up since 3 a.m. this morning due to a malfunctioning iPhone. Thanks a lot, Steve Jobs. She has also the coolest nickname that I've heard in a long time. Her students gave it to her, and they call her the Cyber Tiger. I've had a lot of nicknames, and none of them are as cool as that. She is going to talk about looking at the digital landscape through the eyes of youth. So please help me welcome Robyn Treyvaud.
Thank you. Not only did I have a problem with the iPhone at 3 a.m. Okay. Welcome to Siberia. So we're going on another journey. And thank you, Julie, for taking us on the journey of early morning in Bangkok. We're going to another place. This is a place called Siberia, where I think many of you hang out anyway. You know, I remember as a child, growing up, my friends and I used to go on bear hunts. We used to visit imaginary worlds, we used to play with imaginary friends, and it was outside most of it and occasionally inside. And our parents could see and hear everything we did. At the end of our very busy explorations, we'd often sit around the television with our families and watch either cartoons or films and sometimes sport. As teenagers, we flirted, we gossiped, we were mean to other kids, we went to the movies and we listened to music. And as I've grown up into an adult, as a parent and now a grandparent, I often reflect on the statement, it takes a village to raise a child. It's everybody's business. But that's got some complexities when the village isn't necessarily just geographic. It's actually digital. We move into a digital landscape. And so the village and the people in the village are not necessarily the people who have direct responsibility for the children who go and visit or who we need to care for. And when I actually work with young people, I'm very privileged to go with them on the equivalent of a 21st century bear hunt. What I find is that most of them, most of the time, have very positive experiences. But we are seeing now a greater prevalence of young people, not just the at-risk youth in the real world, but the just mainstream kids who aren't necessarily having a good time. They're often being harmed or harming other peers. They're often having their digital reputations destroyed very quickly, their social currencies removed from them. And I want to take you on this journey to Siberia, where you will actually need a compass. And the compass you're going to need is a digital moral compass. It's all they have to guide them in their explorations, in their experiences, and it's all we're going to have really at the end of the day as well. It's what you choose to do when no one's watching is the real test of a moral compass. Well, no one's watching in this place called the internet. And this diagram really helps me explain a couple of other things as well. One is that online safety in its first iteration focused on children as victims. And they were seen as victims of potential pedophiles, of other stranger dangers, the adult, often male offenders who were out there to sort of meet them, groom them, and often sort of have encounters with them either online or offline. It was not evidence-based, and it was very much about fear-mongering. And it wasn't helped by the fact that the media jumped on board with what was happening and harming children online. And you would expect many parents, as they did, believe that, oh my goodness, every time my child goes online, there's a potential that they're going to be groomed. We then moved into the next phase of online safety, which was when we realised that young people were creating their own content, that they were also responsible for the harms that were being experienced by their peer groups. And so we moved very quickly into, well, we started to get some research and some evidence to tell us that that's actually not what was happening. And we moved then into the sort of stage where we're at now, which is very much research-based. And we have a prevalence of what's known as covert bullying, any form of bullying not seen or acknowledged by children, which spikes in transition years in schools in years 5, 7 and 9 in Australia. So when I ask grade 4s, 5s and 6s, if someone's being mean to you in the real world because the real world meanness drifts into your online world, where do you think it might happen? And most of them, and I tested it out again when I was working in some schools in Singapore recently, and I said to them, so, you know, if someone's being mean to you, who's doing it? Someone at level 3, which are friends of friends of friends, or often those random strangers? Is it level 2, which are your friends of friends? Or do you think it's at level 1, which are your friends? Now, at that age, most of them put their hand up at level 3 or 2. I asked the same question of year 7s and 8s later in that afternoon. What did they say? Every single hand went up for level 1. So something happens to their experiences, their knowledge and understanding of what's happening to them in that online space. And it can happen in all sorts of places. It's not just on MSN when they're instant messaging. It's not just in Facebook or any of the other social networking places that they're hanging out. It can happen in all sorts of other places in that digital sort of environment or landscape in which they move. I'm very much a glass half full sort of person. A lot of people say to me, Robyn, how can you do the work you do? Isn't it all doom and gloom? Absolutely not. It is absolutely the most privileged thing I can be doing, which is working alongside parents in schools and working with kids, talking about all the wonderful things they do online, but also helping them to understand that they have rights, responsibilities, and they do have control over the things that might happen to them in that digital world. So the glass is definitely half full, and there are some amazing opportunities, as we all know. But we do have challenges. And the challenges are not necessarily the ones that we face on a daily basis. A moral compass is a work in progress for young people. We have to pass on to them the values and beliefs and the strategies about how to deal with situations they come across, so that the moral compass is pointing like that for them, when in fact what we're finding both in the real world, which you would expect, and in the digital world, that little moral compass is spinning. The glass half full, I don't have to talk to you, this group here, about all the riches and the fullness of technology. The need to be connected is one of the most important drivers for children and increasingly for teenagers. We know for mental health, for adolescents especially, it is absolutely critical that they are well connected to family, friends, a community, a school, that if they are disconnected, they then become at risk. Being connected for young people is a 24/7 experience. It's not just about, as we did, come home, jump on the phone, stay on the phone for 3 hours, debrief the day, do some planning for schoolwork, etc. This is a 24/7 being connected experience for them, and it's a very rich experience and a very, very important one. The connections are much broader and wider than anything we had, and certainly that I had when I was growing up. The 24/7 access anywhere, anytime, certainly with mobile technologies, is certainly a great enabler for that being connected. And when we're talking about mobile social networking, I think it's important that I raise 2 points about it. One is that we are not able to filter or put any sorts of monitoring software or controls that families might want to have, or even schools might want to have, to protect children often from themselves, from others, and sometimes from inappropriate content. And when it comes to parenting in the 21st century, which is probably one of the greatest challenges of a generation of parents, is that they have really no adult supervision when kids are walking around with mobile phones with browsing capacities, where they can take it anywhere, anytime, and adults really basically have no idea where they are, what they're doing, and whether they're having a good time when they do it. So the little moral compass sounds a bit like this. No, I'm not going to use LimeWire to download music, and no, I'm not, because if I don't pay for it, I've been told it's illegal. No, I don't think I'll do it, but you know what? Everybody else does it. It's on the family computer. I've seen adults in my family download movies, TV series, music. No, I don't. No, look, well, actually, maybe I will, because everybody does it, and no one actually seems to get caught. So the digital moral compass for the 21st century looks a bit like this. And it's a great device to be using with young people when you're talking about scenarios that they are faced with on a daily basis and what is guiding their decision making. It's not clearly right or wrong. What's the big deal? Everybody does it. It depends on the situation. But one of the biggest drivers for the choices that young people make when they go online and use mobile phones, but also in the real world, the physical world, is I'm going to do it because I'm not going to get caught. Now, I have the greatest privilege in listening to the stories that young people tell me. I find it quite fascinating when 200 Year 7s come in for a conference, which is 2 hours spent with Rob talking about cyber stuff. They don't really know what they're going to get. And I can pick the attitudes very quickly as to what am I up against, because it's usually, right, she's old, she has no idea what she's talking about, we're not going to listen to her, and we're certainly not going to tell her anything. But what happens very quickly is they figure out very quickly that I'm actually on their side. And I talk to them about what I know, what I hear, and the sorts of stories that are shared with me. So these groups of students, about 20 minutes into our conference, I asked them at their tables to talk about what are the things about your digital world that worry you, or that you hear other kids are having some issues around. Just sort of have a bit of a chat about it. I couldn't stop them from chatting. And they compiled these lists. So I just want to quickly share some of the items on this list because we don't often hear this. These sorts of things are happening under our radars. And it's so important that we listen to and communicate with and talk with, not talk to, children and young people about their lives in the digital world. They've realised, many of them, that nothing is truly private on the internet, that they have no control over their audience, be it today, tomorrow, next year, in a decade, etc. That privacy issue is now probably one of the most important issues alongside covert bullying, cyberbullying and harassment. Pretending to be someone that you're not, you can be whoever you want to be. It's a problem if you're lying about your age to sign up for an account on Facebook when you're only 8 years old. And it can also be a means by which other kids can harm others. Passwords being cracked and hacked. Even grade 4s were talking to me about the fact that they share their passwords with their friends. That it's often their friends who then hack and crack into their either their password and then hack into their accounts. Even Club Penguin accounts can be hacked into. And you can sort of imagine the sorts of things that can be happening in Club Penguin when an account is hacked into and everybody wants the little coinage that will buy you some clothes at the mall. Lying about your age to sign up for an account. Now, I usually get about a 90% hit rate of Year 4s who have Facebook accounts. When I ask them how many of you have gone in and changed the settings in your privacy, the privacy settings, I'd get less than 1%. So many of them don't know how to protect themselves and keep themselves safe. Many of them are uploading some wonderful things, but not necessarily in the knowledge of who their audience is. Chainmail for Year 7s in the school that I was working at was a major problem. And even though up here they know that, no, look, if I just delete that email that said, send this on to someone, or 20 people in 5 minutes, and if you don't, you will have some harm, such as a fingernail being pulled during the day. So they have this enormous anxiety about, oh, I must pass it on, even though each of them knows, well, no, maybe I shouldn't, and maybe that's not going to happen anyway. So one table, as I was moving around, said, Robyn, could you actually have a discussion with all of us about this chainmail and ask them to stop it? And I said, no, I can't do that. We can have the good discussion, but I can't make you stop to do anything. This is your world, this is the culture that you are developing, and only you can make decisions with each other about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Security threats, they're very concerned that we, the adults, and often in the family home, do not have sufficient security protection for all those sort of threats that we know that are out there. They're worried not just about the lack of knowledge about security threats by parents, who they think are pretty clueless at the best of times. They're worried about a whole range of things that they're looking to parents for guidance and support, and they're not receiving it because of the lack of knowledge and understanding. No control over your digital reputation. You can post anything that you like about anybody on the internet, not a problem for us perhaps. But when we're building our digital reputations from such young ages now, the concern is that you can be posting wonderful things about you, that people are making judgments about you over time, but you don't actually have control over all that content. The easy access to pornography. In Australia, we have research that found that between the ages of 6 and 12, we have the greatest increase of access to pornography and exposure to it, girls and boys. And by the 15-year-olds, boys, it's 100%. Not a surprise there. But they're not necessarily seeing the very benign topless Playboy woman that was sort of around, you know, in the days when, you know, that was there for teenagers. They're seeing the very hardcore pornography that we know is available. They're not talking to us about it. They're worried that if they come and tell us about their feeling of discomfort or embarrassment, that we will actually remove access from the internet and they won't be able to still have their social currency. They're overconfident in their use of technologies, but they're naive to the impact that some of those virtual actions can have in the real life world. Their words, not mine. Peer pressure, the anonymity of offenders and postings, inappropriate texts, photos, and addiction. Again, they're worried about, this is all I can think about. I'm at school, but all I can think about is going home and playing that game. Not all youth are at risk. Certainly the research has found that the young people who are at risk in the physical world take those risks and vulnerabilities with them when they go online. No single technological development can solve these risks. We have to consider the psychosocial makeup of a child, the family dynamics, and the relationships in that child's life to be a better predictor of risk than anything to do with the technology that they're using. Dana Boyd, many of you would know Dana's work. Dana was the chair of the literature review for that past study, and she said, we've got to stop talking about the internet as the cause of problems and think about it as a megaphone. Covert bullying, any form of bullying behaviour not seen or acknowledged by adults. You can see that this will have a drifting element to it. You will see also in this list that many of these are behaviours. If we talk to young people about cyberbullying, they look at us quite blankly. They don't talk about cyberbullying. They actually talk about the behaviour. And you'll see that most of those behaviours can occur both online and offline. And again, the drifting. 2 in 5 students feels that things stay the same or get worse after telling an adult. 64% of young people will turn to a friend for advice rather than a parent. And as a cohort of adults, I think, you know, and as parents and people often in schools and in communities, I think we have to work a little bit harder to improve those sorts of statistics. Listening to the voices, a really important part, I think, in terms of creating a safe place in the digital world for our young people is to develop partnerships with them. Give them the opportunities to talk, to share, to show leadership. One example was a student summit we held in Melbourne last year where we had 250 Year 10s who basically are now going back to their schools, back to their communities to demonstrate leadership, to be role models, to work with their peers, to work in mentoring capacities with either younger children and, dare I say, also with their parents and their teachers. One campaign and movement that I'm really closely involved with has come out of a bigger project in Bendigo, the northwestern part of Victoria. These young people have shown enormous capacity to show leadership in their communities, but also in their peers. So their campaign is Networkers in Action. What could we do, is what they said. We know all of this stuff. We're experiencing it. We know our friends are experiencing it. What can we do? And the issue of sexting was the one issue that they picked up, was this has reached epidemic proportions, and there are certainly adults that I know in my capacity in the work that I do, be they police or working for Telstra, who are our biggest mobile carrier. And this is the taking of images, nude or sexually explicit images, and sharing them with a friend. These unfortunately constitute child pornography. We have them often spread virally in retaliation or revenge for things that might go pear-shaped in relationships. Unfortunately, the police get involved. We now have situations in Australia, certainly in the United States and elsewhere, where this phenomena occurs, where very young minor children or young adults are being charged with child pornography offences. That is not what we want to happen. So, one of the outputs, if you like, of Networkers in Action is a film that they've made around sexting, which is being developed as a resource, which is being rolled out in Australia and also with the United States. I've used it at NIST here yesterday with parents, with students and with staff, and I think it's going to help us have those discussions. There's a YouTube video about it, so you can see that in terms of them using the power of social media to explore and to share their sorts of ideas about these issues, I think that's very powerful. Of my grandparents, I remember very little. I have the odd memory, I have a faded photo. Unlike my 2-year-old granddaughter Sophie, who will have access to my digital footprint, perhaps even including this TED Talk. I'd like to think, though, for Sophie and her generation, we're going to be remembered more for the sorts of things that we tell them and share with them about what it means to be human, about what it looks like and feels like to be respectful, kind, ethical and responsible, no matter what world they inhabit, be it digital, physical. Thank you.
Thank you, Robyn. That was good. Thank you, Robyn. Okay.